Hello, hello, hello. This is HQ of the TPP.
With Sheriff John Ledbetter today, who says that this is a very active investigation, but left this message for people who are still wanting answers.
Number one, give the family space and time. They are still processing this tragic event and all of Nolan's close friends. And we're still waiting for 100% confirmation. I'll assure you that the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, we're looking at this whole case just like we would any other case, and we're going to be as thorough as we can.
Now, Sheriff Ledbetter tells me that even with the autopsy scheduled for tomorrow, he doesn't believe that there were any signs of foul play. But again, this is a very active investigation, and as answers start to become uncovered, we will keep you up to date with the latest details on air. And
I need somebody to explain to me something. Please explain to me, because I don't think I get it. Maybe I missed a step. Maybe there's some new way of investigating a death that I don't know about. But an 18-year-old young man goes to an island with his friends. The friends come back. He does not. His phone comes back. He does not. His mother reports him missing. 2 days later, a body is found in the water. The cause of death has not been publicly determined. The manner of death has not been publicly determined. The autopsy results are not back. The toxicology reports are not back. The investigation is still active, right? The sheriff is still asking people for videos, pictures, and information. But somehow we already been told that foul play is not suspected. How? That is the question. How did we get there already? How do we have the understanding that it's not foul play? Because I'm not saying Nolan Mills was murdered. I'm not saying I know somebody put their hands on that boy. I'm not saying anybody hit him, and I'm not saying I know exactly what happened on that island. What I am saying is that you do not know either. The sheriff does not know either. And that is the problem, because I think we have narrowed this whole conversation down to two possibilities. Either somebody physically killed Nolan or nobody did anything wrong. And I'm sorry, but that is not how the real world works. There is a whole lot of ground between murder and nobody being held responsible for anything. That was a young 18-year-old boy. It's kind of hard for us to believe that he had a heart attack in the water. A person can die without anybody putting a hand on them, and somebody else's actions can still be a part of how that person ended up dead. That does not automatically make it murder. It does not automatically make it a crime. It does not automatically make anybody legally responsible. That depends on the evidence, the circumstances, what people knew, what they did, and what they failed to do, and what the law actually requires. But you have to investigate all of that before you can tell us this was simply an unfortunate drowning. So let me explain what I mean. What if nobody touched Nolan? What if nobody pushed Nolan? What if nobody hit Nolan? Fine. What if the boat started leaving and Nolan didn't actually want to be left behind? What if he panicked? What if he thought they were playing with him? What if he believed they were coming back? What if he went into the water trying to reach the boat? Nobody would have pushed him. Nobody would have touched him. Nobody would have physically forced him into that water. But then the question becomes, why was that boat leaving without him? Did the people on that boat know he was trying to get back? Did anybody see him enter the water? Did anybody hear him call out? Did anybody realize he was in danger? Did anybody go back? I'm not saying that happened. I'm saying you have to find out whether it happened before you tell me nobody else played a role in his death. What if he was left on that island and later tried to find another way off? What if he thought he could swim to another boat? What if he saw people in the distance? What if he entered the water trying to get help? But then that's the weirdest part right there. He saw the boat in the distance. What do you mean saw the boat? There was dozens of boats there. He could have swam to anybody's boat and said, hey, can you take me back across the mainland? My boys left me. If his boat left him, why didn't he do that? He could have did that. I'm assuming he was among some friends other than those 4 guys. And even if he wasn't, he had that girl that he was talking to. See, it's so many unanswered questions for you to be saying nothing happened and it was no foul play. Okay? And nobody had to physically do anything to this boy for something to happen. But that does not make the question of why he was alone irrelevant. Why was he alone? All those people, we see all those people on that island. We see all the people from the videotape. Where was all these people? You mean to tell me his friends was the last ones to leave and he thought he was leaving with somebody? What's going on? That don't even make sense. There was an argument. We heard the argument. We see the videotape. We see everybody looking towards the shore and the arguments. And we hear F-bomb, F-bomb, F-bomb. He's a grown man. He can swim. Blah, blah. You should know how to swim. Blah, 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 blah. So that tells me if they were arguing about whether Nolan could swim or not, why would Nolan get in the water and try to swim after them instead of standing on the island screaming, help, help, come get me, come get me, come get me? But he wouldn't have been the last person on the island. Where was the other people? You mean to tell me he waited on the island and nobody saw him sitting there and didn't say, hey, do you need a ride? That tells me right there, if all of them left him, that tells me he was already off alone by himself somewhere. But why would he go off by himself somewhere when they're partying right there? Why would he go off on his own? Why would they leave him if they were his friend, even if they got into an argument? Okay? Maybe they left and thought somebody else was going to take him. And all of these boats left and didn't see him anywhere. There was not one responsible person left to see and make sure the island was clear of people. I don't understand how you can just say there was no foul play. That alone would raise my antennas about what was going on. Okay. Then again, what if he was upset? What if he felt like he was not welcome on the boat anymore? What if he was told to get the fuck off the boat? Get away from them? What if he believed he had to leave the group? He could have walked away, become disillusioned, disorientated, fallen, entered the water, or made a bad decision while angry or frightened. Nobody would have had to touch him. But what happened before he walked away would still matter. What if he was running from a confrontation? Listen to me carefully. A person does not have to physically catch you for you to die trying to get away from them, okay? If somebody is chasing you, threatening you, frightening you, or making you believe you're in danger, you may run somewhere you would not normally run to. You may jump somewhere you would not normally jump. You may enter water you would normally not enter. You may take a risk you would never take if you did not believe you had to get away. Nobody has to touch you for their actions to matter. Again, I'm not saying that happened to Nolan. Something just occurred to me after thinking about this and going through it. What if that argument was them having the fight and they took his phone and said, he's a grown-ass man. He know how to walk. He know how to swim. And he's saying to them, I don't know how to swim. You can't leave me here getting into a fight. And maybe they took his phone and decided that they wasn't going to let him on the boat. Wasn't nobody going to let him on the boat. And he had to swim back. And by him trying to swim back, he died. That would explain why nobody touched him. That would explain why they had his phone. That would explain the argument that they had about him swimming. That could explain damn near the whole scenario. Nobody put a hand on him. They just took his phone and he got left on that island and he tried to swim and he drowned. That could explain so much right there. Just think about it. Think about what we heard. He's a grown-ass man. He know how to fucking swim, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know how to swim. According to them, that was Nolan who said that. So why would he get into the water if he knows he don't know how to swim? And the only way he would get in the water, even if he doesn't know how to swim, is that he got left on the island by himself. That means All of those people left that boy on the island by himself, and he couldn't swim without his phone. Wow. It sounds reasonable to me. Wow. I'm saying that's why the investigation cannot begin and end with we do not see evidence that somebody physically attacked him, because that does not answer every question. What if he was intimidated? What if somebody threatened him? What if he was made to feel unsafe? What if he walked away because he believes staying with those people was more dangerous than leaving? Nobody has to lay a hand on somebody to change the decisions they make. And if that person dies as a result of the situation that was created by you, his friends, investigators have to look at the whole chain of events. What happened first? What happened next? Who said what? Who did what? Who knew what? Who was screaming about he's a grown-ass man, he should know how to swim? Who was Nolan arguing with on that shore? Everybody was watching that. Don't nobody know nothing. Don't nobody know why there was an argument. Don't nobody know why they got into a altercation. And what did people do when they realized something had gone wrong? What did they do when they realized the black guy wasn't on the boat? What if somebody dared Nolan to do something dangerous? What if there was pressure? What if there was drinking and somebody said, I bet you won't do it. I bet you can't swim from there to there. And they dared him to swim and he drowned. What if somebody convinced him he could make it? What if everybody else knew the water was dangerous? That's a possibility right there, right? Once again, I'm not saying any of that happened, but nobody has to push you into the water for their conduct to become part of the story of how you ended up there. What if Nolan was impaired? What if he had been drinking a lot? What if the toxicology comes back and shows alcohol or something else in the system? Some people are going to hear that and immediately say, well, there you go, case closed. No, it might explain part of what happened, but it could create a whole new set of problems. Who knew he was impaired? How impaired was he? Could he walk? How many beers did he have? Could he make decisions? Did y'all care enough to find out how much he drank and if he was impaired enough to do or stay behind? If you knew your friend was impaired, if you knew your friend was drinking too much, why would you leave your friend? That's your friend. Did the people with him know he was in no condition to be left alone? Did they leave him alone? Was he drunk and he stumbled into the water? Did they think somebody else was responsible for him? Did anybody make sure he had a safe way home? Did anybody check on him, call his family, call for help? Again, I'm not saying that makes somebody automatically guilty of a crime. The law does not make every bad decision a crime, but negligence is real. Recklessness is real. A failure to act can matter when the facts and the law create a responsibility to act. You do not get to skip the entire investigation just because nobody has a bloody shirt. What if Nolan had a medical emergency? What if he became dehydrated, had a seizure? What if he had a heart problem nobody knew? What if he became confused? He failed. He became unable to save himself. That could be a terrible accident. Absolutely. But then we still need to know when it happened. Was he already in distress when the boat left? Did anybody notice anything else? Was he asking for help? Did anybody know he was not okay? Or did this happen after everybody was gone? These details matter. Why would he leave? Why would he just stay on the island by himself? I would assume that once you went over to the island or you went back to mainland and he wasn't with y'all and you didn't see him with nobody else, y'all would go back and see where he was at. What if he sat down and fell asleep by the water and the water washed up onto him and drowned him and pulled him into the water and he was unconscious or whatever? Anything. A terrible accidental drowning. That is a possibility. I'm not ruling it out, but I'm not the one investigating this case. And if I'm not allowed to rule out an accident before the evidence is complete, then why should anybody be allowed to rule out every other possibility, right? That is my problem. You cannot tell the public you're still trying to figure out what happened and at the same time start steering us toward what did not happen. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot have it both ways where you're asking the public for help, video, people who said something, heard something, did something. You're asking for all of this information and then rule out the fact that it could have been foul play. Can't have it both ways. Either you know enough to rule things out or you're still investigating. If you're still investigating, then investigate. Because right now there are too many unanswered questions for anybody to be telling his family or this public what not to suspect. Of course, maybe he drowned, but somebody could have held him under the water. Somebody could have had a hold of his feet and drug him into the water. He could have got tied up with a rope and got dragged into the water. Nolan Wells went to Horn Island with a group of friends on the 4th of July. According to the sheriff, he was seen around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. His friends left the island without him. The explanation we have been given is that from what investigators understand, Nolan chose to stay. All right. Who says that? Who heard him say that? Who saw him make that decision? Did Nolan tell all his friends he was staying? Did he tell one? Did somebody else tell investigators that Nolan said it? And most importantly, is there an independent evidence that confirms that? Because he chose to stay is not a small detail. That is the entire foundation of the story we're being asked to believe. If Nolan voluntarily stayed on the island, that's one story. If Nolan was separated from his group, that's another story. If Nolan was angry and walked away, that's another story. If Nolan was afraid and walked away, that's another story. If Nolan was impaired and others left him, that's another story. If Nolan thought they were coming back for him, that's another story. If Nolan was unable to leave, that's another story. If his friends believed he had another way home, that is another story. Those are completely different situations and stories. So when you tell me, from what we understand, he chose to say, I need to know exactly what that means. Because an 18-year-old young man is dead. Healthy young man. This is not the time for vague language. There is no phone. Nolan did not have his phone with him. Now, maybe there's a completely innocent explanation for that. I don't know. Maybe he left it on the boat by accident. Maybe he handed it to somebody. Maybe the battery was dead. Maybe there's something we do not know. Why would a kid that young not have his phone? Fine. Then tell us when you know. But you cannot act like it is unreasonable for people to ask why an 18-year-old supposedly chose to stay behind on an island without his phone. That is not conspiracy thinking, okay? That is a question. That's a question. If I chose to stay somewhere, I usually keep the one thing that allows me to call somebody, text somebody, check the time, find my location, or ask for help. That's what kids do. So how did Nolan end up separated from his phone? Who had it? When did they realize they had it? Did anybody try to go back? Did anybody call for help? Did anybody contact Nolan's family? What time did the friends return to the mainland? What did they think Nolan was going to do next? How did they think he was getting home? Those are not accusations. Those are basic questions, and this is what bothers me. People keep acting like asking questions means you've already accused somebody. No, asking questions is what you do when the story does not have enough answer. And let me say something else. Recklessness is not the same thing as murder. A terrible decision is not automatically a crime, but nobody murdered him is also not the same thing as nobody did anything wrong. Those are not the only two choices. If you leave somebody in a dangerous situation, whether that creates legal responsibility depends on the facts. If you know somebody is impaired and unable to protect themselves, what you knew and what you did can matter. If your actions cause somebody to panic and put themselves in danger, the sequence of events can matter. If you create a dangerous situation and then walk away, the details matter. If you know somebody is in immediate danger and you do nothing, the law may look at whether you had a legal duty to act. I'm not the prosecutor. I'm not the judge. I'm not going to declare anybody negligent without the evidence. But I'm also not going to accept this idea that unless somebody physically pushed Nolan into the damn water, nobody else could possibly bear any responsibility for what happened to that boy. That is simply not true. The question is not just who touched him. The question is what happened to Nolan. Those are two different questions. Nolan's mother reported him missing around midnight. He had last been seen 8 hours before. So what happened during those hours? Who saw him? Who spoke to him? Where did he go? Was he alone? Was he drinking? Was he injured? Was there an argument? Was he upset, frightened? Was he trying to catch up with the boat? Was he trying to find another way off the island? Did anybody see him enter the water, see him struggling? Was there any sign that something had happened before he ended up in that water? We don't know. And apparently investigators do not know everything either, because they are still asking the public for help. They want original photos, original videos. They want eyewitness accounts. They want information about arguments, disturbances, unusual activity. Now, wait a minute. If you're asking the public whether they saw an argument, a disturbance, or unusual activity, then why are you already telling us foul play is not suspected? What are you looking for? You cannot ask the public to help you fill in the blanks while telling us you already have enough information to lean away from one possibility. That is the part that does not sit right with me. And there's a viral video being examined because people have questioned whether an argument shown on that island had anything to do with Nolan. We do not know whether Nolan is connected to that video or not. Let me say that again. We do not know. And I'm not going to turn internet speculation into fact. But if law enforcement is looking at it, then obviously they have not finished figuring out what happened to that boy on that day. So stop asking the public to accept conclusions before the investigation has produced the facts. That is all people are saying. That's it. We're not asking you to arrest somebody because social media has questions. We're not asking you to manufacture a crime. We're not asking you to ignore evidence if that evidence actually shows that Nolan drowned in a tragic accident. If that is what the evidence proves, then that is what the evidence proves. But prove it. Show us the timeline. Explain how he was left. Explain how he was separated from his phone. Explain who saw him last. Explain what he did after his friends left. Explain how he ended up in the water, what the autopsy shows, what the toxicology shows. Explain whether there were injuries, eyewitnesses, and explain whether the actions or inactions of anybody else contributed to the circumstances that ended with that boy being dead. Then tell us what happened. Don't give us the ending before you finished reading the book. Oh boy. And black people have a reason to be cautious when officials tell us very early, that nothing's suspicious here. That does not mean every death of a black person is murder. It does not mean every white person around a black person is guilty of something. It means we have seen cases where families have had to keep asking questions because the first explanation did not explain enough. We have seen families told to accept a story that later changed. We've seen evidence ignored, eyewitnesses overlooked. We've seen investigations treated like inconveniences until public pressure forced people to look again. So no, you do not get to shame people for asking questions. Not when an 18-year-old went away with a group and never came home. Not when everybody else returned and he didn't. When his phone returned and he didn't. When his body was found 2 days later. No, and especially not when you're asking the public to help you figure out what happened. The family has now retained attorney Ben Crump. And some people are going to roll their eyes at that because they've already decided that Ben Crump represents what he represents to them. I guess. I don't care. This family needs somebody whose only job is to ask questions for Nolan. Law enforcement has its investigation. The medical examiner has the autopsy. The public has its speculation. But Nolan's family deserves somebody looking at every record, every eyewitness, every video, every timeline, every inconsistency from the position of one question. What happened to that boy? Not just did somebody physically kill him. What happened to that boy? Because Nolan can't tell us. That is what makes this so serious. Everybody who came back from that island can speak for themselves. Nolan cannot. Everybody else can explain what they saw, what they heard, what they thought, what they did. Nolan cannot. So the investigation has to speak for him. The evidence has to speak for him. The timeline has to speak for him. And that means the investigation cannot begin with protecting a theory. It cannot begin with calming down the public. It cannot begin with telling people what they should not suspect. It has to begin with the facts, all of them. Maybe the final answer is drowning. Maybe this was a horrible accident. Maybe he just stumbled into the water. Maybe nobody touched him. Maybe nobody threatened him. Maybe nobody chased him, abandoned him. Nobody acted negligently. Maybe every unanswered question has a reasonable explanation. That is possible, but right now we don't have those explanations. And until we do, I'm not going to pretend that asking questions is irresponsible. What would be responsible or irresponsible is not asking them. An 18-year-old young man went to an island with his friends. His friends came home. He did not. His phone came home. He did not. And 2 days later, that body was found. You do not get to hand us the story with half the pages missing and then get mad because we don't understand the ending. Finish the damn investigation. Get the reports, toxicology, all types of videos. Eyewitnesses build the timeline minute by minute, find out exactly who saw Nolan, find out exactly why that boat left without him, find out exactly why his phone left without him, find out whether he truly chose to stay, whether he was impaired, whether he got in an argument, he was frightened, tried to follow the boat, whether he entered the water trying to get home, find out whether anybody knew he was in danger, find out whether anybody's actions, decisions, or failures contributed to what happened next, and then come back and tell his family what happened. Because nobody physically killed him does not answer every question. No foul play does not automatically mean nobody made a decision that put him in danger. Accidental drowning does not automatically explain why he was alone. And a death can be accidental while the circumstances that led to it still deserve serious investigation. Until then, no, we're not accusing, but we're watching, we're asking, and we're not going to be rushed into accepting an answer before the evidence is even finished speaking. Okay? So y'all do your job, and then you come tell us what happened. If you guys like my breakdown of this, please hit the like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And we're going to stay on top of this. We're going to stay on top of this. Yes.